Have you ever felt like there's just not enough hours in the day to get everything done? Well, I remember a time when I felt the same way. I was overwhelmed by my to-do list, and I felt like I was constantly putting out fires. But what if I told you that the problem isn't a lack of time, but rather a lack of clear priorities? Well, in this video, I'm going to share some strategies to help me climb out of the chaos and ensure that I was not just accomplishing tasks, but also that those tasks align with my overall goals. And in the many professional roles that I've held over the last 2 decades, I've repeatedly faced the challenge of managing multiple tasks and priorities. And something I've learned along the way is that it's not just about getting things done, but about getting the right things done. And with a little practice and habit building, these particular strategies I've learned can also help you focus more on doing the right things. But before we jump into that, time for a fun fact. According to a study by the University of California, the average office worker is interrupted every 11 minutes by things such as emails and phone calls. That's a lot of time every day. And that also really hurts when you consider that it takes us an average of about 25 minutes just to get back on task and focused again. But with the right priority management strategies, you can have better control of your time and work much more efficiently so that these interruptions have way less of an impact on your overall productivity. That said, are you ready to take control of your to-do list and start making real progress towards your goals? And let's dive in. And today we'll be going over the 5 strategies that I've personally found to be the most helpful in effectively managing priorities. So the Eisenhower Decision Matrix, how to balance your workload, the importance of negotiating new priorities, the yes and no rule, and then finally we'll wrap up everything with the importance of maintaining flexibility in your schedule. That said, let's begin with discussing the Eisenhower Decision Matrix. And this is a decision-making tool with 4 boxes called quadrants that helps you decide on and prioritize tasks based on their urgency and importance. And its biggest benefit is that it helps you to more easily sort out and identify the less important tasks in your to-do list so that you can either delegate them or simply not do them at all. And this one has definitely been a game changer for me in helping to manage my own priorities. And now you may be wondering, what does it mean to sort tasks based on urgency and importance? Well, let's take a look. So as you can see here, tasks that are both urgent and important go into the first quadrant. And these are things that are often crises or sudden deadlines that seem to pop up and thereby need your immediate attention, and that you should handle probably right away, like responding to a boss's or a client's email you just received about a problem they're having with a particular service or product. Then the tasks that are important but not urgent go into the second quadrant, and this is where it's best to spend most of your time working. And these are the tasks that you should fully plan out, well, as much as possible, as they're the important things that contribute to your long-term goals, like adequately planning a new project or implementing new ways of working, such as the strategies you're learning today. And next, tasks that are urgent but not important go into the third quadrant. And these are the tasks that tend to pop up and seem to require your immediate attention, but they tend to be less important when it comes to your time. And these are things that are commonly referred to as things such as quick hits or simple questions that have a pretty easy answer or you can easily answer. And so for the tasks quadrant, it's a good idea to use the 2-minute rule you learned about in the time management video to help you sort them out and either quickly do them or add them to your task management system to do later. And then lastly, tasks that are neither urgent nor important go into the 4th quadrant. And these are the things that you should consider eliminating as much as possible, such as doom scrolling on social media or the internet. And I'll add a slight caveat to the list you see in the fourth quadrant with this. Everything's good in moderation. So the key here is to not let these things consume all of your time, especially when you have goals that you want to achieve. So consider if any of these are pulling you away from your most important goals, and then simply cut down on how much time or how much you spend doing them, or eliminate them if that's not possible for you. And again, this matrix is intended to be a guidance tool to help you make better decisions about how you spend your time so that you get the results you truly want. And now, let's discuss the importance of balancing your workload effectively. And of particular note here, it's very important to check your task load and schedule before taking on additional priorities. And this is where the daily task load rule comes in. And the rule is very simple. You should only take on 1 to 2 tasks per day. And these are things that if nothing else were to get done that day, you'd still feel like you accomplished what you needed to for the day. And this more manageable task load increases your flexibility for handling tasks that are urgent and important, so Quadrant 1 in the Eisenhower Decision Matrix, along with those that are urgent but not important, so Quadrant 3 in the Eisenhower Decision Matrix, as those tasks arise. And this also ensures that you'll still have time for the things you deliberately plan to do, such as moving a major project forward or having one-on-one meetings with either your team, supervisors, or clients. And as a side note here, and taking a piece from the Mastering Time Management video, I recommend doing this because it's not a good idea to completely fill your day with tasks, since other people will most likely need at least some of your time and energy every day. That said, taking on 3 to 4 tasks per day should really be your max, as this significantly reduces your flexibility for handling urgent tasks that might pop up. And it also increases the likelihood of creating a high stress environment, which would also be much more likely to lead you to burnout. And speaking of limiting your daily task load, let's now talk about negotiating new priorities. When a new task comes in, especially from someone else, it's very important to ask some clarifying questions so that you can determine where this new task should fit in your list of priorities. And so here are 4 examples of questions that you could ask to figure this out. The first is, when does this need to be done by? Now, you probably don't need me to tell you this, but people don't always clarify their expectations when they ask you to do things. Most notably, the expectation of when it should be done. So this question helps to resolve that particular issue. Then the next example is, these are my current priorities. Where should I place your request in this list? And I found this one to be particularly helpful with deconflicting priorities with a boss or a coworker, as it gives them insight into what you're already working on. And I've also found that oftentimes people who ask you to do things for them don't necessarily need it taken care of immediately. And so asking this question helps them to clarify how urgent their request is to you. And for the third example, I'm currently working on another high priority task. Can I get you an update on your request by the end of the day on, let's say, Thursday? And if you need an answer sooner than that, please let me know, and please also provide some additional details on this priority so that I can adjust my priorities if necessary. And I found that this one just simply gives some additional context to the person who asked you to do something, along with letting them know when you expect to be able to address their requests. Again, setting expectations. And as such, this gives them the opportunity to further clarify if their request is actually more urgent than they may have alluded to in their message or their request to you, and also explain what's driving the urgency. And then the fourth example is there anyone else who can do the task who you would also be okay with doing so? Now, I tend to use this one very rarely, as it can come across to a person as being that you may be trying to avoid the request. But I say that with a caveat that I have found it to be most helpful when I know for a fact that I cannot take on any additional work at the time the person is making the request, or they've very clearly stated that their timeline for the request cannot be adjusted. And so if my task load is already full, then I understand that I need to communicate to them and figure out what their urgency is for their request so that I can find out if maybe I can help them still with their request by getting someone else who is available to help them. And ultimately, the purpose of asking these questions is to help you better manage expectations, theirs and yours, so that you can ensure that the most important tasks are always being addressed first. And continuing with the idea of better managing expectations, let's next talk about the yes and no rule. This rule states that you can't say yes to everything without eventually saying no to something you previously agreed to do. And so, with this rule in mind, each time you consider agreeing to take on a new task, you should first reassess your current priorities, especially if you owe things to important people such as your team, your boss, or another important client. And then you need to decide what you're going to deprioritize or possibly eliminate in order to make room for this new task. And you should also be sure to clearly communicate your decision to adjust your priorities to those who might be impacted by it, and request extensions to deadlines when and where necessary. And speaking of requesting extensions, make sure before doing so that you properly consider just how much extra work the additional task would most likely create for you. And ensure that you also consider whether or not the additional workload would make it either impossible or unreasonably difficult to complete the work as originally requested, or that the quality would otherwise suffer. And if you find this to be the case, then I would absolutely recommend that you request an extension to the deadline if possible. And as an additional note, when requesting extensions, be sure that you do so as soon as possible after you realize that you need to adjust your priorities so that you don't risk damaging your professional relationships and thereby your personal brand. That all said, the main purpose of this rule is to help you set better boundaries so that you can manage your workload and the quality of your work more effectively. And finally, let's talk briefly about an essential aspect of priority management: flexibility. Now, I talk a lot about the importance of flexibility in my videos, but in this case, I'm doing so because in the world of priority management, being overly rigid in your processes or how you do things can become a major roadblock. And so it's important to allow as much as humanly possible for flexibility in your schedule, your priorities, and your professional plans, because this can greatly reduce your overall stress and allow you to more quickly identify alternatives and possible solutions to problems that arise, and thus be able to plan accordingly for any adjustments you may need to make. And remember, being successful or being a strong professional is not about having or building a solid plan that can account for absolutely everything that might happen, but it is about having a clear direction you're going in and the flexibility to decide how best to get there. I still remember when I first started using these strategies years ago. I was amazed at how much more productive and just less stressed I felt. And it was literally like a giant weight had just been lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer overwhelmed by my to-do list or constantly feeling burned out. But instead, I felt like I was more in control than I ever had been before. I knew what tasks were most important, and I was finally able to create a clear plan for tackling them. And the best part? I had so much more time for the things that truly mattered to me, since I was no longer spending most of my time putting out fires. And so I was finally making steady and real progress towards my actual goals. And as you start implementing these strategies, I'll tell you something that I would have told myself back then. Be patient with yourself. Good things take time, and change doesn't happen overnight. But with each step you take in making these improvements to your work habits and strengthening your professional management skills, you're also going to gradually get closer to your own goals. So, are you ready to take control of your priorities and start making real progress towards your goals? Then I encourage you to start applying these strategies today. Take a look at your to-do list and then use the Eisenhower Decision Matrix that you learned about today to figure out what quadrant each of your tasks falls into. And you can do this by simply drawing 4 boxes on a sheet of paper and then listing each of your tasks in its appropriate box that you believe it goes into. And after doing so, see if you could find a way to make it so that more of your time, if not most of your time, is being spent in quadrant 2. So the important but not urgent. And this is again to ensure that you have the most flexibility to handle whatever comes your way. And so you can focus on doing more of the work that truly matters to you. And on that note, keep in mind that managing your priorities is not just about getting more done. It's also about making sure that what you're doing aligns with your overall goals and the direction you want to be going in. Or rather, it's about climbing your ladder and ensuring that it's on the right wall. And remember, the journey doesn't end here. And as you implement these strategies, you'll no doubt face new challenges, and you'll learn even more about yourself and your work habits. And each time you do, you'll become an even stronger professional, and I'll be here cheering you on every step of the way and guiding you as you navigate your personal and professional journeys. That said, if you found this video helpful and you'd like more tips and strategies on personal and professional development like these, then be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because next time we'll be diving deep into the 4th professional management skill, communication management. And if you have any questions or you would just like to share your own priority management strategies, be sure to leave a comment below, because I would love to hear from you. And as always, I wish you the very best as you continue your personal and professional journeys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.